Okay. Well, good evening, everybody, and hello to everybody online. You're all very welcome. It's a great pleasure to welcome everybody here tonight to the BSA to hear the work of my favorite, currently, Williams Fellow in Ceramic Petrology at the Fitch. Sergios is in his final year of his postdoc, I believe. Or are we trying to boot him out early? Working on the petrographic analysis from the Neolithic and Chalcolithic site of Thermi in Samos. He's well known to all of you, I'm sure, and is a beloved member of the Fitch and the BSA, although a really bad poet. He did his PhD at Sheffield, graduated in 2018, where he honed his skills in the application of scientific analysis with traditional ceramic studies. And he has been working on the prehistoric settlement at the Heraion on Samos with a Cypriot German team there. He has had fellowships at the BSA, in Koç University in Istanbul, and have you had another fellowship? The University of Cyprus. He's also published extensively. Ridiculously, if you look at his current academia page, he's got like something like 1 billion articles in 2024. I think 5, but 4. Okay, that's still quite a lot. Really on the sphere of expertise in areas of the East Aegean, like Poliochni and Lemnos, the Aegean-Anatolian cave on Samos, and an article which he was working on last year on the mobility and connectivity between the East Aegean Islands and Western Anatolia. It is a great pleasure to have Sergios speaking to us tonight on ceramic landscapes to mobility dynamics in the late Chalcolithic, early Bronze Age, Northeast Aegean. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much, Rebecca, for this very lovely introduction. And I'm glad to be your favorite-ish, one of your, members. Very glad. So it's a pleasure to be here with you tonight and be able to share my ongoing research, as I am near the end of my second year from the position of the Williams Fellow in Ceramic Petrology. No, not. Okay. So what will I be covering tonight? I will begin with an overview of the chronological and geographical background of this project, continue with some theoretical concepts that are relevant to my research, and then present 3 case studies from the Northeast Aegean region, specifically Poliochni on Lemnos, Thermi on Lesbos, and all 3 sites from Samos, more or less, and finally provide some preliminary thoughts. So you might be wondering why did I choose these specific islands and time periods, and basically why this project? Well, the simple answer is that late prehistory is fascinating, but also because the fantastic and the very diverse landscapes of these islands, and of course the lovely beaches, as you can see on these images. But archaeologically speaking, there are many reasons, and to a great extent because I was intrigued by the lack of ceramic analysis in this area. And this was somewhat surprising despite extensive excavations and numerous publications over almost a century in this area. Like Thermi was published, 90 years ago. But the reason was also that the island's role in shaping much of the Aegean relative chronology, which was based on the long stratigraphic sequences and rich ceramic assemblages. How much this region has been neglected is also reflected in Jeremy Ratter's words, who has pointed out that there is a need to become more familiar with the Eastern Aegean, and this view shows on the one hand the region's significance, and on the other, of the gap in archaeological scholarship. The chronological framework of this project covers the late Chalcolithic and early Bronze Age, which is a transformative period, as many changes happen that include the development of complex social structures, technological advancements, increasing connectivity, and the emergence of urban settlements. This was often thought to contrast with the 4th millennium BC, which is considered a period with a smaller scale, less complex societies, but new data and the careful re-examination of older excavations show that the processes were already in place in the Chalcolithic. Pottery has a role in understanding not only chronology, but also in examining connectivity, the organization of production, and technological change. Beside the geographical and chronological importance of this region, there are some terms that have a significant role in my work, like insularity, marginality, and islandscape. But most of them, they share this sense of isolation of these islands. There are also a number of theoretical concepts that are worth exploring so that we can place the islands in the right context in better understanding connectivity. One such approach relies on the detection of shared cultural features, the so-called koini, such as ceramic styles, construction techniques, burial practices, and others. And these are usually based on evolutionary theories that favor the notion of homogeneity and cultural uniformity. Alternatively, the region is often researched under the influence of post-colonial approaches that explain the islands as isolated, peripheral, passive, and marginal, and passive recipients of superior traditions. And I would like to zoom in a bit more in this approach, as I believe that the geocultural area of the Eastern Aegean is a useful case study for the investigation of broader developments. Not only it is an area with complex historical trajectories, the examination of archaeological connectivity is affected by biases in modern political borders and ethnic constructions between Greece and Turkey. It is in this framework that the East Aegean islands should be examined during prehistory, where, although geographically distant from the rest of the Helladic world until the early 20th century, they were considered as part of the Ottoman Empire and so culturally, sociopolitically, and economically oriented towards the East. With the loss of the Arperea, after the political separation between Greece and Turkey in 1922, the cultural character of the islands has also been dramatically reconfigured. Until recently, this political breakup of what had once encompassed the islands and coastal Anatolia in a single territorial space was reflected in the archaeological practice between the two countries and the study of Greek islands and Turkish coastlands in almost total isolation from each other. However, this gap is nowadays bridged through important collaborative research between local archaeological authorities and the involvement of foreign schools from both countries. Particularly the role of foreign archaeological schools since the early 20th century in serving national traditions and their position on where these islands belong has influenced greatly the subsequent theoretical developments in the archaeological practice of these islands. And for example, in the case of Lemnos, and I will repeat this later on, the Italian school aimed at establishing ethnic links between the Etruscans and the Northern Aegean, while for the early Bronze Age Lesbos, the arguments favored close affinities and perhaps migrations of Anatolian people towards the west. Similar efforts were made in the early investigations of coastal Western Anatolia with the aim to elucidate its Hellenicized prehistoric past. So these account for two contrasting trends in archaeological scholarship, either in support of separateness or boundedness between the East Aegean islands and Western Anatolia in an effort to validate modern ideas, or emphasizing their cultural coherence versus the rest of the Aegean world, which is indeed characteristic of the marginalization of this region, both geographically and intellectually. And finally, a more recent trend in the reconstruction of large-scale phenomena of interaction relies on concepts of appropriation and hybridization, adaptation, and creativity through the application of various methodologies. Aside from the deficiencies of our methodologies for the reconstruction of connectivity patterns, the detailed study of production, consumption, and distribution of certain artifacts across space and time may enable a better understanding of the relationships between places at the microscale. So in my project, I am following the so-called ceramic landscape approach, which has been developed in the last couple of decades and has been well established by previous work at the Fitch Lab. This approach combines theories from archaeological science with landscape archaeology, and it refers to the study of ceramic production systems by reconstructing raw materials provenance and technological traditions in relation to understanding the social landscapes and communities of practice. On one hand, the identification of local ceramic traditions using locally available raw materials can provide a view over the perception of interaction and engagement with physical landscapes by potters. On the other hand, the study of shared technological traditions can be used to explore the learning mechanisms within a site and its surrounding region. So based on these views, I am applying a bottom-up approach that focuses on the analysis of pottery through various stages and techniques, with the aim to test if the Northeast Aegean island communities were interacting at different scales between each other or with other areas. And I do this by combining the macroscopic examination of pottery, the study of geology and collection of raw materials, and their examination by thin section petrography and elemental analysis. Here you can see the sites that I'm working on. So Poliochni, Troy, Thermi, Emborio, Heraion, and other sites on Samos. But for this presentation, I will only focus, I chose to focus on Lemnos, Lesbos, and Samos. And so let's start, after all this theory, with Poliochni. Poliochni is situated in southeast Lemnos and holds a strategic location opposite the western Anatolian coastland on important trade sea routes that connect the Aegean with the Black Sea. Ever since its discovery, it has been discussed in relation to major themes in Aegean early Bronze Age, such as the emergence of proto-urbanism, social complexity, social stratification in the presence of the elites, craft specialization, but also seafaring and maritime connectivity. Because of its complex socio-cultural configuration, several views of Poliochni considered it as one of the earliest urban settlements in the Aegean, or for others, the oldest city in Europe. Others have described it as a sea-oriented Anatolian-style community with major contacts with the Cyclades and mainland Greece, but also as an outpost of migrants from Troy due to impressive cultural resemblances. What was mainly emphasized, though, was the role of Poliochni in extensive trade networks in the context of metallurgy. And here you can also see on the bottom part of the screen of the slide the chronology of the different phases I will be talking about soon. So I will talk about phases black to yellow. The international character of Poliochni is also supported by the rich metal hoards, like the so-called sorry, I skipped something. Lemnos has drawn attention already 1 century ago in 1923. And here you can see the main publications that came out in the past ever since. And the Italian Archaeological School, the goal of their investigations were to find the origins of the Tyrrhenians and to trace the cultural connections between the Northern Aegean and the Etruscan civilization. The phases, as I mentioned a minute ago, span from the black to yellow, and that's how they were designated by Luigi Bernabo Brea that published the excavations. So these phases span the late Chalcolithic and until the end of the early Bronze Age, and actually the early Bronze Age to late phase. And this is an important time because several transformations took place in the organization and planning of the settlement, but the most remarkable ones took place in the yellow phase. And on the outline, you can see where the different phases are located on the map. So the international character of Poliochni was supported by the rich metals like the gold treasure that you see on top left, but also copper and bronze artifacts, silver jewelry, steatite, and obsidian. Less impressive imports include ceramics that were initially recognized typologically, and you can see them on the top right. And this actually triggered me to attempt and better understand the connectivity of Poliochni through determination of provenance. So let's look at the pottery transformations over time. So the different phases are denoted with different colors, as you can see on the slide. So the first one, the black phase, includes several shapes. I'm not going to bore you with different types of pots, but is it this one? How do I do it? Yeah. But this shape is quite important because it's and it also continues in the blue phase and the green phase, because it shows links with some sites in the Cyclades, but also then the northern coast of Crete, the so-called fruit stand or stemmed cup. The tradition of the blue phase continues, but with changes in the more brown burnished surfaces, where in the black phase we had more black surfaces and dark surfaces. And then we have new decorations and more shapes. And it is around this time in the blue phase that we see the first imports like color transport jars, pyxides, and the sauce boat. In the green phase, pottery shows both continuity in the shapes, but also change from the blue phase in the lower quality of polish, as the excavator mentioned in the publication. But also we see an increase in the Cycladic imports. Pottery of the next phase, the red phase, shows more changes in the increase of large storage jars and pithoi and tripod cooking pots, but also, so these pots, but also we see the first appearance of new Anatolian inspired or Anatolian style shapes like, sorry, the red phase. So like these ones, like the so-called tankards or the two-handle cups. Finally, in the last phase, the yellow phase, we see more novel shapes with Anatolian or Trojan affinities like the Debas cups, but also new technological developments that also appear around the Aegean at the same time. And I will talk about this in a while. And on the right part of the slide, you can see an overview of the different wares across time. And you can see that in the first phases, we have more dark, and we go to brown and then reds, red surfaces. So in order to establish a more detailed understanding of ceramic developments at Poliochni, we followed a holistic approach with both the physical study at the macroscopic level and the laboratory-based methodology within section petrography and WDXRF. And following the morphostylistic analysis, we undertook a macroscopic examination of ceramic fresh breaks and surfaces with a dynolite microscope of all available pottery at the museum and the archaeological storeroom. This allowed the recording of variation in color, texture, and recognizable fabric parameters, and the identification of these three main fabric groups that you can see here. I'm not gonna explain what we see here because it's, it's too much. The geology of Lemnos was also examined through raw materials prospection to explore the availability of suitable raw materials for pottery manufacture, but also to assess the intra-island lithological variability. And I think you can see here from the map how quite complex the geology is. The sediment samples were made into briquettes and fired to two different temperatures at 700 and 900 degrees to observe differences in the microstructure and then to compare those, the petrographic images to the ceramics. Thanks to permits by the Italian Archaeological School, the effort of Antiquities of Lesbos, and the Hellenic Ministry of Culture, a number of representative ceramic samples across all phases were analyzed. And let's see, what the analysis showed. So fabric 1 represents the main clay recipe, which covers half of the sampled material, and it's found diachronically at the site, so from phase black to phase yellow. Some heterogeneity was observed across the samples, but we also noted a strong association between functional criteria and chronology. And by this, I mean that during the first phases, black and blue, the fabric is used for the manufacture of mainly tablewares, while in the red and yellow phases, it is used for the manufacture of cooking and storage pots. This fabric is characterized by a combination of tough and intermediate volcanic fragments and sedimentary ones. I'm not going to give any more details about this, but what is important is that the provenance is more likely in the wider vicinity of Poliochni and the pyroclastic formations of the Poliochni area. The elemental analysis of fabric 1 clarified more the picture, and we found that pots with a different function were distinguished mineralogically, and such distinction was not possible through petrography only. So this, together with a variation in surface color, indicates the parallel existence of more than one production units for local pottery production. And by this, I mean that you can see here that like cooking pots or serving and storage pots, they scatter different areas of the in the principal component analysis, which shows what I just said, that probably, although they look quite similar in petrography, chemistry showed that we have probably different groups of people using the same raw materials or similar raw materials. Fabric 2 contains exclusively volcanic rock fragments, as you can see in these images. But it's different from fabric 1, and it's perhaps coming from the northwest part of Lemnos. And this is supported also from the geological samples that were collected in that area, this area. And this could perhaps suggest the consumption of these pots from production center beyond Poliochni. Now, the big change happens in the next phase, in the yellow phase, when we observe several technological changes in the exploitation of resources, but also in the processing and manipulation of raw materials. And more specifically, there seems to be some degree of specialization and form-specific recipes. And for example, I will show you now in a minute that fabric 4 is used to make only Debas cups, and then fabric 5 to make these kind of pots, and fabric 6. And here you can see how these different sedimentary fabrics look like. And what is very important is that we found that these ceramic fabrics match very well with the geological samples collected from the area, from here. Now, in terms of the extra-insular outreach and connectivity of Poliochni, the analysis has shown some interesting new links that were previously unsuspected and correspond to different production centers and provenance locations. More specifically, this fabric is used for the manufacture of storage and cooking jars, and its volcanic mineralogy is not compatible with the geology of Lemnos. Instead, according to matching petrographic parallels, as you can see here, these pots are coming probably from the island of Jokchenda, of Imbros, and I think here you can see how similar they are. And yeah, from this island, which is just across from Lemnos. So this is a quite interesting result, as we typologically thought that these pots are local. Other imports that correspond to storage vessels of the red and yellow phases came from different Cycladic islands. Here are some examples of these fabrics that have a provenance in the western Cyclades, perhaps Kea, Kythnos, or Sifnos, these ones. However, a different production center in the western Cyclades, or even eastern Attica, which form part of the Attic Cycladic crystalline belt, cannot be excluded at this point. And finally, this one comes probably from Amorgos. Our analysis could also distinguish for the first time imports from other centers in the Northeast Aegean region that had previously not been typologically recognized. And so we identified two different fabrics that can be assigned to Lesbos, these two, and one that probably could come from either the Troad or the Urla region in Western Anatolia. Now I will just summarize the main analytical outcomes from Poliochni before moving on to Lesbos. The first main result concerns the longevity of pottery-making traditions. The application of the ceramic landscape approach revealed both elements of continuity and change within different stages of the manufacturing process across different chronological phases. Towards the end of the 3rd millennium BC and during the yellow phase, we see several changes in raw material exploitation strategies, but also in finishing, in the surface treatment, and the firing. The ceramic changes observed during the red and yellow phases coincide with significant transformations in the socioeconomic organization of the site, which follows a broader trend across the Eastern Aegean. This trend is exemplified by the emergence of a distinct set of drinking and serving ceramic vessels, which is referred to as Anatolianizing forms in the Cyclades or the Castri group, which shows interactions with Western Anatolia. The second main outcome of this research concerns connectivity. Firstly, we were able to distinguish production locations and potentially intra-island mobility. But as for regional and interregional developments, our work has most significantly revealed Poliochni's interconnectedness, which was previously suggested through the circulation of metals and obsidia. Several suspected connections with the Central Aegean include various Cycladic islands, as well as unsuspected links with the Northeast Aegean. The identification of imports from Lesbos and Imbros, together with evidence for the circulation of metals, suggests a route running north to south. This sea lane made it easier for prehistoric boats to travel between the northeast and southwest across the open sea. And it is not a coincidence that the early Bronze Age sites of Agios Petros and Skiros in the Sporades were centers for the distribution of Milian obsidian, while probably Lemnos was a center for trading metals. And you can read more about this on this paper that we published just a month ago, I think. And let's now move on to the second case study, which is the site of Thermi. Thermi is located, you can see on the map, it's located on the east coast of Lesbos. And it was excavated on behalf of the British School at Athens by Winifred Lamb between 1930 and 1933. And the results were published in 1936 in this volume. So these excavations brought to light five successive phases that you can see here. So they're called Town 1 until Town 5. And here you can see the chronology. This is the outline of the settlement. It's not, I think today you can only see the latest phases. And sorry, the examination of that I have done on the material has shown that probably there is an earlier phase in the late Chalcolithic, and I will explain this soon. Let's now look at the architectural phases that produced the rich ceramic assemblage from Thermi, so that we can understand the settlement transformations over time. And starting from the earliest phase, so Thermi 1, it was founded as a small town with an organized pericentric layout without a fortification wall. So this one, although we don't see many changes happening in the following phases, Thermi 2 and Thermi 3, major changes take place in Thermi 4, when we have a new settlement layout and orientation of buildings, and the protection of the site with a fortification wall. In Thermi 5, a more refined settlement organization and stronger defensive wall appears. Similarly to architectural changes, ceramic production at Thermi shows remarkable transformations across different phases. And this is the classification that Winifred Lamb has done in the material. She categorized all material in three classes. So Class A includes the pottery from phases 1 and 2 and consists of black burnished wares like bowls, pyxides, and cups, but also more rarely red wares that include the coarse cooking pots. And this is what I mentioned earlier, that I found these pots that they probably belong to an earlier phase that was not published in the volume. Class B corresponds to towns 3 and 4A, and now we see the appearance of new shapes. But the most distinctive change is that the surface now is not black, it's more brown and also mottled. And then we have Class C, which covers the final phases, towns 4B and 5. And again, we see the appearance of new shapes that show more connections with like Troy, but also the appearance of potential imports, at least typologically. So, but beyond the characterization of the local production, a number of suspected pottery imports were recognized morphostylistically, and you can see them. You can see them here. So I thought that these, at least macroscopically and typologically, they look different from the rest. And these were show the outreach of Thermi together with other finds like marble figurines and bowls, but also metal pins and bone artifacts. So in order to test the variability and changes in the patterns of ceramic production, consumption, and movement at Thermi, the ceramic samples together with geological samples collected from different locations along the east coast of Lesbos. And here you can see where I collected these geological samples. So then in the same way that I worked with Poliochni geological samples, I made them into briquettes and I analyzed them. We made thin sections and I analyzed them petrographically to compare with ceramic samples. The complex character of the ceramic assemblage was first noted macroscopically, and I think you can see it here. You can see how different these, at least visually, how different they are. So I was able to identify 4 different, maybe there is more, macro fabrics. And based on this overall variability, I wanted to test this further with petrography. And here are the results. So fabric 1 is used diachronically for the manufacture of bowls and jars and comprises a heterogeneous group that relates to the mixed lithology of the ultramafic geological formation. So it relates to this area, so close to the site. And here you can see how close the geological samples match with the pottery samples. The next one, so fabric 2 is the largest clay recipe that I could identify and is very consistent with the manufacture of black burnished tableware vessels of phases 1 and 2. It is made up of a completely different clay, so of pyroclastic rocks and others. And its provenance is most likely in the Polychnitos and Skopelos formations, so these red ones. So it's quite a distance from the site. So I believe that this shows some kind of an intra-island movement and connection between Thermi and probably sites located near to this area. The next one, fabric 3, includes pyroclastic and volcanic rocks and separates off from fabric 2. And this is used mostly for the manufacture of this kind of pots, but only in the later phases of the settlement, so phases 4 and 5. A completely different fabric series, which are related geologically with the metamorphic and sedimentary deposits in the vicinity of Thermi, So the marble schist and phyllite units are used in, I don't remember. Yeah, I think across all periods, yeah. And definitely in towns 1 until 3. And here you can see that petrographic fabrics on the left side and the geological sample here, again, they match quite well. So this was, again, an indication of where the raw materials were coming from for the manufacture of these pots. So we saw that there is some movement within the island, but what about the connections of Thermi outside of Lesbos? We have identified fabrics from at least 6 distinct off-island sources, mostly jars, jugs, and pyxides, and these imports suggest connections with the Cyclades like Naxos, Kea, or Kythnos, and other islands like Chios, but also others with yet undiagnostic provenances. And here you can see these imports that I could so far identify. And now to summarize the analytical results from Thermi, we identified the exploitation and use of 4 main lithological categories of raw materials, which show the active role of different groups of potters and distinct production units. The different sources all seem to be located in eastern Lesbos. Chronological and functional correlations were also noted. For example, fabric 1 was used consistently across time, while other fabrics like fabric 2 was specific to the early phases. Another point is that similarly to Poliochni, there are several manufacturing changes that relate to clay processing, finishing, and firing around the same time. So in phase 4. Finally, the analysis has brought to light previously unnoticed connections with several sites through the identification of the imports that I just showed. And let's now move on to the final case study, which is the island of Samos. So this is a place that I have studied quite extensively over the last 10, 12 years. And its spatial configuration allows for a more holistic investigation of changes in ceramic traditions, but also in the reconstruction of exchange networks in prehistory. And this is why in this site, I analyzed pottery from 3 different sites. The so far known prehistoric sites on Samos, which are Castro Tigani and Heraion, that Castro Tigani spans the Neolithic and Chalcolithic. Heraion spans from the Middle Chalcolithic to the Middle Bronze Age. And then we have this newly discovered site, which is a cave in the northwest mountainous area. And actually, we just published the paper 2 months ago with the first results in collaboration with the colleagues from the F48 of speleology, paleoanthropology and speleology. And this is quite interesting because we know that this area was not isolated as we originally thought in prehistory. So while I studied the ceramics from all of these 3 sites using various methods, today I will only touch on just a few points, specifically on how thin section petrography combined with a program of raw material prospection, along with an ethnoarchaeological study of modern pottery traditions on Samos, can help us understand both local and regional movement and the use of resources. So I began by analyzing around 350 samples after carefully examining all pottery from the Heraion diachronically. And this showed both local production and the circulation of pottery within Samos. On this slide, you can see the different clay types, some of the different clay types I could identify for cooking pots, but also for other functions. But you can also see an imported, the first import at the Heraion, which is a cheese pot, probably from Kea or different place in the Western Cyclades. A more detailed study revealed various production sites active from the late Chalcolithic to the early Bronze Age too, so the middle of the 3rd millennium BC. But also others that were more specific to certain periods. Comparing these ceramics with the clay samples from across Samos showed interesting patterns of intra-island mobility. And I will now talk about each of these different clay recipes and try to locate where they to locate their provenance in the area. So this fabric, the ophiolite related fabric, was found to be in use from the Chalcolithic at both sites, at both Tigani and the Heraion. And here you can see examples of ceramic thin sections from either side. Yeah, and this indicates probably I mean, they are close by, but it shows that there is probably some kind of communication between the sites. And what is quite interesting is that I could identify the provenance of this fabric. And here you can see the clay thin section that is, it's identical with the ceramics. And it's interesting because it only appears geologically in this yellow area on the island. So it definitely shows some kind of movement from this area to this area, or maybe there was a different site here that we haven't identified yet. I don't know. A completely different clay recipe that you can see here was in use diachronically again from the Chalcolithic to the Early Bronze Age 2 period, and is linked to volcanic outcrops. And it was found at all three different sites, so Lemnos, Heraion, and Tigani. And yeah, so, and again, this is the location that I could find matching raw materials. But then when I collected clays or sediments, let's say from this area, I found that there is some similarity also with these ones, although they are not the same. The recent analysis that I have done on the late Chalcolithic pottery from Agriomyrnos cave has shown some correlation with the volcanic fabric from Tigani, and you can see that this is the thin section from the cave. You can see that they're quite similar, but also we've done elemental analysis, WDXRF, on these samples, and we found that they somehow scattered together with the ones from Tigani. It doesn't mean that they're coming from that side, but it could be a possibility. Finally, the metamorphic fabric represents a distinct pottery-making choice and has the longest span at Heraion, but is absent from Tigani. And the closest clays that I could locate are very close to the site, of course. So this is one of the, yeah, this is the typical fabric, the typical clay recipe for the Heraion. But I also found one or two samples that's on Agriomyrnos, but then again, I don't know if there is a connection with Heraion or there is something similar in this area in terms of the provenance. Apart from the local pottery traditions and the intra-island mobility, it was also feasible to trace off-island imports at Heraion. Evidence of connection starts as early as the Chalcolithic, as I have shown, but sustained and increased connections are seen in pottery imports already from Early Bronze Age 1. The so far data suggests connections of Samos with sites in southwest coastal Anatolia, and here are the places that produced some of the imports that I found at Heraion. Mostly in transport jars, like the ones you can see on this slide, but also in a pottery group that finds close typological and fabric correlations with the Meander River Valley region. And here you can see some examples of these imports. Imports at the Heraion become even more visible in early Bronze Age too, late, so around the middle of the 3rd millennium BC, with the expansion of connections with the Cyclades. And these are just a few examples of jugs and transport jars, which are two of the most typical shapes to be distributed across the Aegean. And here you can see imports from Amorgos, perhaps also Kythera, and many other single imports, let's say, from other sites. I'm not going to show them here now, but these are just some of the examples that I could identify at Heraion from this specific period, the early Bronze Age to late. What is quite interesting is that I could also identify imports from Western Anatolia for the consumption of tableware vessels that are usually described, as I said, in the Central Aegean as Anatolianizing or the Castri group. And here you can see two examples of such fabrics that relate to pots like tankard or bell-shaped cup. And this is quite interesting because there is a very long discussion about this phenomenon, this Castri group phenomenon, and we don't have many examples from this area of imports from Anatolia. I cannot pinpoint the provenance, of course, but I have found parallels from other sites in Western Anatolia. Compared to the previous periods, there is indeed an increased connectivity visible through the appearance of ceramic drinking sets and transport vessels. And it is extremely interesting to compare this phenomenon with other sites, as, for example, with Poliochni and Troy, and that's what I'm planning to do in the next months. And now at the end of the 3rd millennium BC, the homogeneous traditions observed in previous phases become more diverse and hybridized, with Samos now sharing features with both the Southeast Aegean and Southwest Anatolia, so mainly this area. There seems to be an abrupt technological change in various stages of the manufacturing procedure, and strong links are seen in the appearance of regional types, such as the red-slipped bowls, this kind of two-handle cups that we find at sites like Lemnos, Rhodes, Miletus, Tafshanadasi. So all of these sites are located in the southeast, southwest Aegean, southwest Anatolia. More Anatolian connections are detected in courseware vessels that you can see on the top of this slide. Again, from this region, from the Meander River Valley region and the Southeast Aegean, while Cycladic imports were also found in the form of dark on light painted ware imports, incised ascoi and pyxides, again with Rhodes, Kalymnos, and Aphrodisias. So these shifts in connectivity patterns of early Bronze Age 3 suggest the establishment of a strong regional network of interactions, which probably enabled the spread of common practices and knowledge transfer. And with this, I want to move on to some final thoughts. I would like to try to say some final thoughts, although I'm not going to synthesize these results. They are still ongoing. The research is still ongoing. While I discuss the material as separate case studies, combining all this information is quite complex. And as I mentioned earlier, other sites like Emborio, Chios, and Troy are also part of this project, and I hope I will be able to share more about this in the future. For now, I want to highlight how re-examining legacy materials from older excavations can reveal important new insights that might have been previously missed typologically or morphostylistically. I also suggested that looking at pottery making within its landscape context helps us better understand how people in the past shaped their social spaces. I focused on three key case studies from islands in the Northeast Aegean, which is a region that is both fascinating but also quite overlooked. And using a ceramic islandscape approach, we could piece together manufacturing patterns and connections at each site, moving from a more detailed micro scale, micro level approach to broader regional interactions. Combining raw material surveys and laboratory analysis allowed us to understand not just the range of local clays and their distance from sites, but also how resources were shared and how connections between different places were formed. Connectivity was also examined through the determination of intra-island and extra-insular provenance locations, and this has further allowed for the use of pottery imports as proxies for the identification of connections between sites. It is then noteworthy that all sites show some shared connections with specific Cycladic islands like Kea. I think you have heard me repeating Kea and Naxos quite much. So these are some of the places that these islands are quite connected with in the early Bronze Age. While other sites like Poliochni shows a rather more regional connectivity with the Troad region. Samos, on the other hand, had more widespread and varied connections with a larger number of sites and regions, though not without conspicuous transformations over time. Moreover, going back to the theoretical framework, we should think of the Northeast Aegean islands not as isolated due to their natural features, but as dynamic contact zones. These islands were not peripheral in prehistory. They maintained an important role due to their long-standing connections to the Anatolian coast and their westward links to the Central Aegean. For example, the transformation of Poliochni into an urban center and one of the earliest maritime hubs during the early Bronze Age was driven due to its strategically advantageous position along sea routes connecting the Aegean with the Black Sea and the northwest Anatolian mainland. And so it can be characterized as both a hub and a gateway community due to its function as a central site within its network, so the Northeast Aegean, but also as a link between sites of different networks like the Central Aegean, Cyclades, and Sporades. Although there were differences in how these connections were expressed over time and space, there was a consistent pattern of influence from specific places in the context of economic activities or social negotiation, peaking in the mid-3rd millennium BC and continuing through the 2nd millennium BC, but this is not a story for now. And I would like to end this presentation by thanking everyone who has supported this work, from the archaeological authorities and the foreign institutes that provided the necessary permits for the materials, for access to the materials and their analysis, but also all of my collaborators, and you can see everyone listed on these slides. And lastly, I want to thank you for your attention, and yeah, look forward for your comments and questions. Thank you.
That was fantastic.
Thank you.
Incredibly, can you all hear me? Yeah, wide-ranging and extensive presentation, and really highlighting the huge amounts of connectivity there are between and within the islands as well. I'm sure there are lots of questions. I have one, but I'll let somebody else take over first. Any questions, please? Don't let him off this easy. Come on.
You can.
No, well, I'm going to ask you a question then. So okay, so it's really striking the location of Poliochni, Thermi, Emborio on that southeast side, or yeah, east side, and even the Heraion to a certain degree.
Yeah.
So how, when you have somewhere like Aegean-Anatolian, how does that contrast in terms of connectivity that you've seen?
Okay, that's yeah. Thank you, Rebecca. The thing about Aegean-Anatolian is that it's a quite different and unique site because it's a cave, and we found, at least from our analysis, we found that all pottery deposited and used in the cave was coming from different places on the island, not from the area. So we believe that it's, sorry, rituals. Yeah, so I think the cave was used for special purposes anyway. So it's quite different. But still it shows the movement of people within the island in an area that we didn't have any idea about before. So it's in the second chronological episode, one from Naxos again. Yeah, Naxos.
Which could be an internal movement of import.
Maybe, I don't know. It could be, yeah. Because at the Heraion we have quite an established settlement in the second millennium BC with imports from with many imports from the Cyclades. So maybe there's, again, maybe it's coming from within the island. I don't know. Ah.
Many things actually, but I'll try to focus on just one thing that concerns me. You presented, the historical trajectories or the trajectory for these sites, and you tried to show, and you showed actually some changes. What I tried to find, perhaps I missed it, or perhaps there is not. I mean, this is the point of my question. Do you think that there is a period in every site or in all three sites that in which you can see some kind of very sharp change in ceramic tradition, or it's the normal changes you expect? Because from the way you presented it, I got the impression that yes, we have some changes, but not something big, not something important, not something sharp and on the basis of what was happening before. Do you think that if you have to pinpoint a phase in which something big changes in the ceramic tradition, it is there? And is it just on site, in all three sites, the same phase, or it does not exist?
Yeah. Thank you, Gianni. Yeah, there is a specific time that changes are quite drastic. And I think this is the Early Bronze Age 2, towards the end of Early Bronze Age 2, which is, it's to be expected up to a certain point because of all this, discussion of increasing movements of, the gastric group phenomenon, blah, 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 all these things. So it's around that time. But at Thermi, on Lesbos, I see them in towns, so phases 4 and 5. The problem is that in the publication, it's mentioned that these phases are not a bit too late, they're quite earlier. But maybe, I don't know. Maybe they can be pushed quite later, I think. And these changes are quite interesting because also at Heraion, but and Poliochni, they are quite similar. I mean, we see that firing is different, colors are different of the pots, the surface is different. The clays are quite drastically different around this time. I don't know if it's clear. Is it to you? Yeah. I have the impression that it's quite common in these sites, the timing of the changes.
But is this only to the basis of the so-called Castri group, or it's something general in the pottery? Because this
I'm not saying that it relates to the Castri group. No. Okay. It's not a. I mean, the local production is changing. The local traditions are changing. Yeah. Again, firing, forming. Okay, maybe also forming, because at the Heraion, this is combined also with forming. When we have the introduction of the wheel, then the clays are changing, firing is changing because of that, and so I think it's probably related to the wheel.
Great results. I mean, it's for a lot of food for thought for the future. Because I was reading all the material you're producing in various sites, but now it's you have the possibility of actually joining all this.
Yeah, I haven't really done,
yes,
but at some point I will.
Thank you very much.
Aha. An in-house question. Okay. Yeah, no.
An in-house question. Yes.
I mean,
thank you, Sergio. Thank you very much. And I mean, this presentation shows, as you said, the potential. You
Yeah.
know, you've started with really detailed studies of specific sites, and as you put them together and start filling them up, you have you can have now a really detailed picture of a whole region. And I would like to push you a bit more on Yanni's question to try and synthesize a bit. You are at this stage now. So I mean, you've given us the story of each site through time, showing how, you know, evidence for both intra-island but also inter-island connectivity exists. There is plenty of evidence. And now what you said about the changes at the end of the EB2, the Castries phenomenon, but is this a homogeneous picture across the area? I mean, can you start seeing really distinct roles for specific sites or specific islands within this phenomenon?
You mean yeah, thank you, Vangelio. You mean the Castries group phenomenon, that one?
No,
or in
I
general?
mean through the early Bronze Age.
Through the
The
early Bronze
Castries
Age.
group phenomenon, yeah, we focus quite a lot of this.
And yeah, and
because
let's not talk
in
about
the
this now. It's
debate-
quite long. Oh my God.
Do you see, for example, that you've talked to us about three big sites? I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
really kind of urban centers for the standards of this time, Heraion and Poliochni and Thermi. Do you see any different role between these three sites?
Role in terms of
Anything? Connectivity
I
or
mean, you know,
different functions or different?
okay, look, I mean, we know that for for many decades now that the role of Poliochni was, you know, to be a trade center in metallurgy and the first metal working center, blah, blah, blah. And it's believed that both Thermi and Poliochni are involved in these maritime trade networks of for metals, from metallurgy towards the Black Sea, or from the Black Sea towards the central Aegean. But the role, I mean, I don't know how much you can see about the role through ceramic analysis. I mean, it's not. I mean, what I can say is that there are some similar sources, like connectivity, let's say, sources between these islands, among these islands, between them at the same time. So EB1, there is a common pattern that we don't have many imports, let's say. No. In EB2, there is a big increase in those imports, but also in the typology. And what I find quite interesting is that for example, Poliochni, it has many similarities with the Troad region, okay, and Troy itself. Then Lesbos, it matches very well with the what's the name? Forgot the area just across. Yeah, I mean the region. How is it called? I forgot the name. Anyway, so that area, and then Samos can be linked more with the upper Meander River Valley in terms of typology, you know, shapes and all these influences. And then, as I mentioned, Samos is changing quite much at the end of the third millennium BC, when at the beginning showed many similarities with the other islands in this, let's say, belonging in this same network. At the end of the third millennium BC, it has more connections with the Southeast Aegean, with the Dodecanese. So there I can see a switch in the position of this island, let's say, in networks. But the role, again, I cannot answer much about this. I don't know. I have to have to think about it more. Yeah,
This time next year.
probably not. I think that's the first and last one, Rebecca. Thank you.
So one of the questions from a raw material perspective, do you feel this island exhibit truly unique compositional profiles, or human choices make them more distinctive? Is there still some potential for very similar fabric profiles emerging from more than one island in this region?
Can I ask you to repeat the question?
Yes.
And about which side?
So from a raw material perspective,
Yeah.
if you feel these islands exhibit truly unique compositional profiles, or human choices make them more distinctive?
I mean, it depends on the raw materials they have. They're available at the sites. They're using the local materials at each site, if we're talking about the local productions. And I think the question is about the local production at each site.
So the second part of the question is there still some potential for very similar fabric profiles emerging from more than one island in this region? Maybe that's one.
And now we're talking about imports, I imagine. It's not clear. I think it's what I mentioned a minute ago, that there are some common sources in terms of imports, like Naxos or like Kea. So I think it shows the yeah, I think it shows the root of this connection of the connectivity between the islands. But I'm not sure if I answered the question. I'm not sure about the what the question was about. Okay, yeah, I can imagine.
So if you have any thoughts on why we mostly see connections to the Southeast Cyclades and West Anatolia?
Southeast Cyclades. Maybe it's because of the metals. I don't know. Yeah, it's western. It's not south. Yeah, it's southeast. Southeast. No, I mean, for example, at the Heraion, I didn't have the time to show everything, but at the Heraion, I found imports from many more islands. Milos, I don't know. Amorgos, Kea, Naxos, probably more that I couldn't identify. So southeast, no.
Should we move on to a question from Michael?
Oops, that's me.
Thanks, Sergio. That very, very, very interesting stuff there. Fascinating for those of us who work in that time period. I'm going to ask you to be even more sort of overview-esque than Vangelio did. I'm kind of, listening to everything you're saying, it's kind of hard to get the feeling. We have this concept of connectivity, which you mentioned a lot. We have this very sort of thriving cosmopolitan view of the world at the end of the fourth and through the third millennium. But then, in terms of how many actual imports you've got, maybe the impression we got a little bit was maybe not so many, although just a second ago you said I have loads of imports at the Heraion. And then I'm also wondering, I'm asking about 4 questions at once here. I'm also wondering if pottery is always the best proxy, and maybe the other materials are actually telling us more about this. And then the other thing I was wondering was about Anatolia, at the extent, I mean, we're all very used to the concept of things coming from Anatolia, but I'm just wondering about, with the 3 islands you've been talking about, what the backward and forward with Anatolia is. So I guess with all of that, what I'm asking is, should we be kind of seeing this as just more evidence for this highly connected world that we think that we believe in? Or do you see, is there more, in terms of local and maybe slightly isolated development that we've been perhaps overlooking with this this connectivity thing that we're all on?
Thank you, Michael. You know, I'm not a huge fan of these broad models and theories, because I mean we need them. We use them because we need to somehow put the data into a context. And I think my title, From Ceramic Islandscapes to Mobility Dynamics, was just to show that this exercise of practice, let's say, of starting from the micro scale, from the local, from the from one side, and then moving from identifying the local production to maybe identifying imports, which can then be used as proxies for connections, whatever connectivity means. Yeah, the movement of things, of people. And so, yes and no. I mean, from your second part of the question, it is a highly connected world. I mean, we expect this. It's not something new. But we can we really identify directionality in the connections? I mean, yeah, I'm saying that I found, you know, these imports and they show these kind of connections, but can I draw a line on the map and say that the boat was coming from area A and you know, going to area B? Not really. So I think you're right. We need to start looking in more detail into how did you say that? Into yeah, not only that, the second part was to focusing on the like small scale, and then moving on to broader questions. And other proxies, sure, yeah, but yeah, of course. I mean, if it's possible, and yeah, but I mean, I'm a ceramic specialist, so I'm doing that, I guess. Yeah.
This is not a question, essentially. Just a point for the discussion. Another problem that the approach of old material has. Okay, it's good that we are able to see old material that it's in the storerooms that has not been studied properly. But the problem is quantification, because, okay, you may have some kind of a connectivity, you may have some vases changing places, but if you are not able to study the entire material, you or somebody else, you never know whether your fabric free, which is an import, represents just on vase or 1% of 10% of the pottery. So, and of course, the interpretation of connectivity is totally different. We're speaking about just on vase or, let's say, 10% of the assemblage.
Yeah.
And of course, this is not a problem of your work. It's a problem of, you know, studying petrographically the material from old excavations.
You're right. Yeah, but then you have no imagination in that, so that's the problem. Yeah, I mean, of course I agree with you, Yanni. Yeah, it's but what can we do? I mean, it's, you know, it's
other science in the future. I mean, not
yeah. But what I found quite interesting is that, at least for the example of Chios or Poliochni, we found this unexpected fabric that is from Imbros, okay, and you know, we could have missed that if it wasn't for the analysis of this old material. So this is quite new. Okay, yes, it's next to Lemnos. I mean, it's very close to it, but still, it's something new. And it adds more information in the map. Yeah, people are doing that. Yeah. You can do that. Wow, yeah, can do that.
Oh, are you pulling a Holt? No one else is like, I was getting more questions. I think that's a subtle hint from the audience that we need to drink some wine and chat to Sergios, person to person, individual to individual.
I hope not. Let's just enjoy a glass of wine.
Very much.
Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you.